Okay, and welcome to the Math for Business and Finance and Math Applications, Chapter 3 Word Problems, the odd number problems, and this one is going to pick up with problem 3-69. All right, 67 was in the last one. All right, so it says here, Mark O'Gara rented a truck from Avis for a weekend, 2 days. The base price was $29.95, so immediately I'm thinking $29.95 per day, so immediately I'm thinking, $30 times 2 days plus 14.5 cents per mile, and I need to know how many miles to figure out how much is going to be charged for his mileage, add them together, and then that's going to say how much does he owe. So it says Mark drove 410.85 miles. Okay, that's good. And then it's, asking me how much does he owe, so the total amount. So my actively thinking about the problem was correct. So let's work out here. All right. So I have $29.95, and that's for 2 days. Okay, and that's going to give me $59.90. All right. Now I could do the multiplication here. All right, and come up with the $59.90. But what happened in the back of my head is saying, well, $29.95, that's 30 bucks, and 30 times 2 is $60. Okay, and 95 is 5 cents off times 2, that's 10 cents. So 10 cents from $60 is $59.90. That process, in my explaining it, took a lot longer than me actually thinking about it. I basically went 3 times 2 is 60 minus 10 gave me $59.90. Right? Instead of actually doing all of this multiplication to get up to $59.90. Right? But go ahead and do it whichever way works best for you. Right, so now that we know that's the base price, now we have to figure out the mileage, how much he's being charged for mileage. So I have 410.85 at 14.5 cents. Okay, all right, now 14.5 cents. Okay, that's where my decimal place goes. It doesn't go over here by the 0.5, so that's wrong. Okay, my decimal place should actually go right here to show 14.5 cents. Okay. So if you automatically did what I did, you're not going to account for enough digits, enough decimal places in the final amount. Right, so now let me do the math here. All right, 5 times 5 is 25. That's 42. That's 5 and 20. 4 times 5 is 20. That's 2, 32, 34. That's 4. And then 4 times 4 is 16. And then, of course, 1 times that number is 58014. Do the math. 5, 2, 8, 13, 8, 9, 17, 5, 8, 9, 5. And I'm going to be bringing it over 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 decimal places. So I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So for the mileage, I get 59.57. And since we're talking about dollars and cents, okay, 3 means I'm going, in the thousands place means I'm going to round down. Okay, so for the mileage, I get $59.57. And I'm going to add it to the base price of $59.90. I get 7, 14, 18, 19. I end up with $119.47 is what he owes for the rental of the car. Okay. 3-71. Bob Ross bought a BlackBerry on the web for $89.95. He saw the same BlackBerry in the mall for $118.99. So in the back of my head, immediately I'm thinking about the difference between these two, okay, because I'm going to go and buy for this much. And so I'm thinking that's how much I'm going to save is the difference between the two. And that's what the question asks. How much did Bob save by buying on the web? So the difference between the two is $118.99. less $89.99. So he's going to end up saving $29. Okay, simple enough, simple subtraction. Okay, here, let's see what this one does. All right, problem 3-73. Facebook announced it is going public in 2012. As a result, billionaires and millionaires will be created in a scenario similar to what happened when Microsoft and Google went public. Facebook's founder, Mark Zuckerberg, 27 years old, has 533.8 million shares worth 28.4 billion. Okay, so just in that sense, what I'm filling in my head is that if his shares are worth 28.4 billion, if I just divide it by 503.8 million shares, that's going to give me a dollar per share amount. Okay, and that would be the price of the of all of the shares. And that's just from, that's the information I inferred from that line of data. Okay, so it says Peter Thiel, Facebook's first outside investors, had 44.7 million shares. So what came into my head is that, again, the back of my head, I'm just filling in information. I'm these are tools in the toolbox that I might use or I might not use. If he has 44.7 million shares, and if I figured out how much the dollar per share from based upon Mark's figures, then that would give me a total amount of how much his shares cost would total. And then of course I can add Mark's 28.4 plus whatever his number is, okay, and come up with how much money they own it in the business. But I keep going down and I see ASOL Partners has 201.4 million shares. Now it's more likely thinking along the lines of I'm going to add up all of these shares, and again I can figure out a dollar per share and then multiply that times the total number of shares to get the total valuation. Right? Mark Anderson has 3.6 and Sheryl Sandberg has 1.8 million shares. So in my mind, I've created, kept in the back of my head, all of these possibilities, all of these tools based upon actively thinking about the data. But what's the problem actually asking me? The problem asks me, what is the total number of shares? Okay, so remember, when you're working out a word problem, you have information that's directly related to what's being asked, to what you're being asked to solve. You have information that is indirectly related, right? Meaning it has to be modified in some way. And you also have information that has nothing to do with, it's not applicable to solving the problem. Okay, so as I'm reading through here, yeah, the problem is asking me what is the total number of shares. So yeah, I'm going to add up the 533, the 44.7, 201.4, 3.6, and 1.9. But this here, 28.4, is one of those bits of information that has nothing to do with solving the problem, solving what's being asked. Now, if the question had said, what is the total valuation? Okay, now what ends up happening is that information, the 28.4 billion, becomes applicable, and all of the rest of these number of shares I have to modify. In other words, I have to go and figure out the dollar per share, and then I have to take that dollar per share and multiply it by that number of shares, that number of shares, that number of shares, that number of shares, and add them all up to get my total dollar amount. But that's not what the question is asking. So just be aware that when you're actively thinking, you keep information in the back of your head, but only use what the question is actually asking for. So let's see here. Yeah, I'll do it on this slide instead of going to the new clean slide. And so I have 533.8 million shares. Okay, keep my decimals aligned properly. Right, then I'm going to add 44.7 million, 201.4 million, 3.6 million and 1.9 million. Okay. I use a check mark. I could have put double quote, a quotation. That's another thing which indicates that you're repeating what's exactly above it, or I could have actually wrote in MIL, 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 MIL for the millions, but it's just my quick little way of doing it. So I'm going to add these up. All right, so that's 15, 25, 34, okay, my 3, that's 6, 10, it's 15, 7, 8, so I end up with 785.4 million shares based upon what the question was asking, the total number of shares. Okay, and so I hope that sheds a little light. It was a lot more complicated, word problem. But again, when you read a word problem, as you're reading, actively think about it. Keep in the back of your mind different possibilities, different scenarios, and then when you find out what it is that what the problem is asking for, only use that information that is directly related to that problem, to what's being asked. And remember, your data can be either direct information, it can be information that has nothing to do with the problem, and it can be information that has to be modified. In other words, if I wanted to know the total value, well, I'm going to have to modify this information. I'd have to take the 533.8 million and divide it by 28.4 to come up with some dollar value, and then use that value and multiply it by the 44.7, by the 201, by the 3.6 and 1.9. That's modifying indirect information in order to come up with something that I can use to actually answer the question. Okay, so with that said, I'm going to stop here and move on to the next video with problem 3-75.